I grew up close enough to the Appalachian Trail that it never felt like a destination. It was just part of the landscape, like the ridgelines themselves. Something you learned to respect the way you respect deep water or old machinery. You didn't romanticize it. You didn't underestimate it. You simply understood that it had been there long before you and would remain long after. People who only know the trail through photos talk about it like it's sacred ground. A place of healing. A place where the noise of the world finally quiets down. And sometimes that's true. There are stretches where the forest feels open and generous, where the air smells clean and the wind moves gently through the canopy like breath through lungs. But there are other stretches. Places where the woods don't feel peaceful at all. Places where the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels intentional. This story is about one of those places, and about the only time in my life the Appalachian Trail made me feel like I didn't belong there. I had been hiking sections of the trail for years, never as a through hiker, never trying to prove anything. Just long weekends, familiar terrain, stretches I'd walked often enough that I knew where the ground dipped unexpectedly and where the trail narrowed just before opening into a view. This trip was supposed to be easy. 3 days, 2 nights, late October, when the leaves were past their peak and the crowds had thinned. Cold enough to keep bugs away, warm enough that you didn't need to worry about ice overnight. I parked at a familiar trailhead just after noon and signed the log. A few names above mine. Nothing unusual. The forest greeted me the way it always did. Muted colors, damp earth, the soft sound of leaves breaking down underfoot. The air smelled alive. The first day passed without incident. I made good time, exchanged nods with a couple of hikers heading north, and stopped once to filter water from a stream that ran clear and cold over smooth stones. Everything felt normal, comfortably so. By late afternoon, I reached a shelter I'd stayed at before. It sat slightly off the trail, tucked into a shallow dip between trees. I remembered it being quiet, but something about it that evening felt wrong. Not dangerous, just heavy, like walking into a room after an argument ended but before the air cleared. I decided to pitch my tent instead, about 50 yards away, where the ground was flatter and the trees more spaced out. I told myself it was about privacy, about preference. Looking back, I know it wasn't. I woke up sometime after midnight. There was no sound to pull me from sleep, no nightmare, no sudden movement. I just opened my eyes, fully alert, with the immediate understanding that something had changed. The forest was silent, not the gentle nighttime quiet of the backcountry, where insects chirp and branches settle and the wind whispers through the canopy. This was different. This was a silence that pressed inward, thick and complete, like the moment before a storm breaks. I lay still, listening to my own breathing, suddenly aware of how loud it sounded inside the tent. I slowed it down, forcing shallow breaths through my nose. That's when I heard footsteps. They were soft, but unmistakable. The sound of something moving carefully over leaves and soil. Not rushing, not wandering, purposeful. The steps passed near the shelter first. I could tell by the way the sound changed, echoing slightly off the wooden structure. Then they shifted direction, toward me. I closed my eyes, as if that might somehow make me less visible. The footsteps slowed as they approached my tent. 2 steps. Pause. 2 more. Then nothing. Something was standing just outside. I could hear it breathing. Not labored, not animal. Slow and steady. Close enough that the fabric of my tent trembled faintly with each exhale. A smell crept in, subtle at first. Earthy, sour, like damp clothing left buried too long. It wasn't decay exactly, but it carried the suggestion of it. Enough to make my stomach tighten. I didn't move, didn't reach for my headlamp, didn't make a sound. After what felt like an eternity, the breathing stopped. The footsteps retreated the same way they'd come, unhurried, deliberate, as if whoever or whatever it was had learned what it needed to know. Eventually, sound returned to the forest. A single insect chirped, then another. The spell broke. I didn't sleep again. Morning light revealed nothing out of place. No disturbed ground. No footprints. No signs of animals passing through. I told myself that fear had filled in the gaps, that exhaustion and isolation had turned normal sounds into something else. I almost believed it, until I noticed the orange survey tape. It hung from a low branch about 15 feet from where my tent had been pitched. A single strip, knotted neatly, catching the light when the breeze shifted it. I hadn't put it there. I was certain of that. Survey tape wasn't uncommon near trail maintenance or reroutes, but this was nowhere near the path, and I would have noticed it when I set up camp. I packed up faster than usual and moved on. The second day was colder. The trail climbed steadily, winding through a stretch of forest that felt older somehow. The trees grew closer together, their trunks darker, their roots exposed like knuckles pushing through skin. The air felt dense, as though it resisted movement. By late afternoon, I made the decision to skip the next shelter entirely. I wanted distance, from people, from structures, from whatever unease had followed me since the night before. I found a spot well off the trail and set up camp as dusk settled in. As the light faded, the same heaviness returned. The sense that the forest wasn't asleep. It was waiting. I had just finished eating when I heard whistling. One long, low note came from uphill. I froze, listening. The sound repeated, identical. Same pitch, same length. Then it came again, this time from downhill. My heart began to race. Whistling on the trail wasn't unheard of, but this didn't sound human. There was no melody, no rhythm, just a sustained tone, like air pushed through something hollow. Then it came from directly behind me. I stayed still, staring into the dark between the trees. The whistling stopped. A few seconds later, I heard a zipper. My zipper, the exact sound my tent made when I opened it. Then footsteps, my footsteps, the slight scuff my boots made on dry leaves. It was copying me, perfectly. The realization settled in with sickening clarity. This wasn't an animal. It wasn't trying to scare me away. It was observing, mimicking, learning. I stayed awake all night, gripping the handle of my knife, listening as it moved around the perimeter of my camp. Never close enough to touch, never far enough to ignore. Just before dawn, I heard boots step onto the trail, heavy boots, and a voice, low and calm, said, "Trails closed ahead." Then silence. I left as soon as there was enough light to see. I didn't finish the hike, didn't check in with a ranger, didn't tell anyone what happened. I drove home and tried to forget it. For a while, I almost succeeded, until a year later when I met another hiker at a gear shop. We got to talking, comparing trails, sharing stories the way hikers do. At one point, he paused, studying my face. "Did you ever hike that section near the old switchback?" he asked. I nodded. "Did you hear the whistling?" The blood drained from my face. He pointed it out on a map. Same stretch, same elevation, same bend in the trail. Some parts of the Appalachian Trail don't want to be walked, and some things out there don't want you gone. They just want to know you were there. I never went back to the Appalachian Trail, not because I hate nature, and not because I'm afraid of walking alone in the woods. I grew up surrounded by trees, dirt paths, and hills older than any city. Silence was never foreign to me. If anything, I always felt most at peace when there were no human voices around. But there was one night years ago that taught me not all silence is meant for people. I was 19 at the time. I was standing at an unclear crossroads in my life. I had just dropped out of college without really explaining why to anyone. I told my family I just needed a short break. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted to do next, so I decided to hike a section of the Appalachian Trail alone. Nothing extreme, not months on end, just a few days, long enough to remind myself that I still had some control over my own life. I chose a stretch in western North Carolina, near the end of fall. The air was already getting cold, the leaves had begun to change color, and there were far fewer hikers. The area was known for its beauty, but it was also quieter than most parts of the trail. The first and second days were uneventful. I passed a few other hikers. We exchanged nods, sometimes brief conversations about the weather, mileage, or good places to camp. Nothing strange, no bad feelings. I grew up with unwritten rules about the forest. Rules you don't learn in school, but inherit from parents who learned them the same way. Don't follow voices calling your name. Don't assume footsteps always belong to people. And if the forest suddenly goes quiet, leave. Those rules were always somewhere in my mind, but honestly, I wasn't thinking about them then. On the third day, toward late afternoon, the trail began to feel different. Not visually. Everything looked the same. Tall trees, damp soil, dry leaves crunching under my boots. But I realized I hadn't seen another person since around midday. I didn't panic. That's how the trail is sometimes. Busy one moment, empty the next. I actually enjoyed the solitude. As the sun began to set, I found a flat spot not far from the main trail. It wasn't an official shelter, but it had clearly been used before. There was a fire ring, packed down ground, and enough trees close together to block the night wind. I assumed someone else would arrive before dark. No one did. As night fell, I cooked a simple dinner, instant noodles, and sat near a small fire. The forest was full of normal sounds. Insects, wind brushing the leaves, the occasional movement far away. Maybe a deer, maybe a raccoon. Around 9 p.m., I noticed the change. The silence came all at once. Not gradually, not one sound fading after another. It was like someone flipped a switch. No insects, no wind. Even the leaves above me seemed frozen. The fire was still burning, but now it sounded too loud. Then I heard footsteps. Not light, not rushed. Heavy, steady steps, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. They came from the main trail. I stood and called out, trying to sound casual. "Hey, this camp's taken, but there's room if you want to share." No answer. The footsteps stopped. I stood there too long, realizing I shouldn't have called out at all. I waited for a flashlight or headlamp to appear between the trees. Nothing. The footsteps started again, but this time, not on the trail. They were circling. Dry leaves crunched in a rhythm that was too even, too deliberate, not the careless, uneven movement of an animal. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but my body reacted before my mind could catch up. My heart was racing. My palms were slick with sweat. Then I smelled it. Metal, like blood and copper coins, like burned wires. The smell clung to the air and coated my tongue, leaving a bitter taste in my throat. I started packing my things without turning around. That was when I heard my own voice being spoken. My name. Clearly, not shouted, not whispered, like someone carefully testing how to pronounce it. The voice came from uphill. I didn't answer. I slowly backed toward the trail, keeping my eyes on the ground. I didn't want to see whatever might be standing among the trees. The voice said my name again. Same tone, same distance, as if distance didn't matter to it. My headlamp flickered, just for a fraction of a second. In that brief light, I saw something between the trees. Too tall, too thin. Its shape was unfinished, like it hadn't fully decided what it was supposed to be. Then the light steadied, and it was gone. I started walking, not running. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid the sound of my steps would draw its attention. I turned off my light and walked in the dark, following the trail by instinct and memory. Behind me, I heard the footsteps follow, always at the same distance. I walked for I don't know how long. Time didn't feel real. There was only my breathing, my heartbeat, and the metallic taste in my mouth. Then suddenly the forest came back. Insects, wind, life. I stopped and nearly collapsed as my legs began to shake. I didn't stop walking until sunrise. The next shelter was occupied. People were there, real loud, alive. I didn't tell them anything. I just sat quietly until my hands stopped trembling. The following day, a ranger came by asking if anyone had seen a hiker camping up on the ridge the night before. I didn't say it was me. He said there had been reports of a campsite torn apart. No food taken, no signs of animals, just gear dragged around and dropped like it didn't matter. I left the trail the next morning. Years later, I told this story to an old hiker in an outdoor gear shop. He didn't laugh. He wasn't surprised. He just said, "You weren't supposed to answer if it called your name." I asked him what it was. He said the trail is older than every name we've ever given it. And not everything that walks there learned how to copy human voices from us. So if one day you're walking alone on the Appalachian Trail and the forest suddenly goes silent, keep walking, don't answer, and whatever happens, don't look back. I grew up with the sight of mountains on the horizon. To some people, Appalachia is nothing more than endless green, hiking trails, fresh air, and quiet. But to those who truly live near it, the mountains feel like something alive, old, watching, holding more secrets than humans were ever meant to know. I didn't truly understand that until the fall of 2018. At the time, I lived in a small town on the border of Kentucky and Virginia. Too small to be called busy, but too close-knit to be truly quiet. Everyone knew each other, and if someone went missing, the news would spread before sunset. That's where I met Eli. Eli was my coworker, quiet, tidy, and always seemed more comfortable in the woods than among people. He rarely talked about himself, but whenever the topic turned to the outdoors, especially the Appalachian Mountains, his tone changed. He came alive. He often talked about remote trails, about parts of Appalachia that never appeared on tourist maps. According to him, those places were the mountain's true face, untouched, unpolished. That's where the mountains are still honest, he told me one afternoon. I should have been cautious, but I wasn't. When he invited me on a 3-day hike along a rarely used trail, I agreed. Not because I was reckless, but because I trusted him. Eli was experienced. He brought printed maps, a GPS, emergency gear, and a detailed itinerary. He had even told his family when we'd be back. We left early Friday morning, before the sun had fully risen. Fog hung low between the trees, making the forest feel enclosed, like a sealed room. Our car was the only one at the trailhead parking lot. The only sounds were car doors closing and our boots crunching on wet gravel. From the beginning, something felt wrong. Nothing I could point to, no clear danger, just a pressure like someone standing too close behind you. The trees felt denser than they should have been. The trail was visible, but it seemed to swallow the sound of our footsteps. About 2 hours in, I noticed something in the mud beside the trail. Human footprints, not shoes, bare feet, large, white, pressed deep into the ground, as if the person carrying that weight was heavy. The prints ran parallel to the trail, then disappeared into the brush. I pointed them out to Eli. He paused, looked at them, then said, "Probably a local. Some people live out here." He said it too quickly, too casually. We kept walking, but from that moment on, I started glancing over my shoulder. Our first campsite sat in a shallow hollow, surrounded by old pine trees. The sun was nearly gone when we arrived. As we set up our tents, I noticed how quiet it was. No crickets, no night birds. Even the wind seemed unwilling to move. Night came fast. I woke up without knowing why. No dream, no loud noise, just the sudden awareness that I was completely awake. The forest around us felt too close. Then I heard it. Human voices, more than one, speaking softly, broken phrases. Thick Appalachian accents made the words hard to understand. The voices came from far away, then closer, then farther again, as if they were circling our campsite without ever entering it. I held my breath, waiting for footsteps in the leaves. There were none. In the morning, Eli stepped out of his tent looking pale. "Did you hear something last night?" he asked. I nodded. We didn't laugh it off. We didn't try to rationalize it. We just stood there in silence, then started packing. When we checked our supplies, we found our food bag open. Not torn, not damaged, The knot had been carefully undone. Some food was missing. There were no claw marks, no bite marks, no animal tracks. The second day felt longer. The forest grew thicker. The trail narrowed. We barely encountered other hikers. And at some point, the voices returned. This time, they weren't far. They stayed behind us. No matter how fast we walked, the sounds remained the same distance away. If we stopped, they stopped. If we moved, they moved too. I began counting my own steps, afraid even my heartbeat was too loud. By late afternoon, we came across an old structure marked on the map as a ranger station. Eli said it had been abandoned for years. That was a lie. The door was gone. The windows were broken inward. The wooden walls were covered in carvings. Names, dates, strange symbols. Lines like tally marks. On one wall, carved again and again with something sharp, were the words, "Stay on the trail." We didn't stay long. As the sun began to set, we heard footsteps, running. Not on the trail, but through the woods, fast, barefoot, then laughter. I never saw what grabbed Eli. I only heard his voice, surprised, then panicked. His body was dragged into the brush. He screamed my name, over and over. I ran. I ran without direction, dropped my pack, tore my skin on branches and rocks. I hid beneath a fallen tree, pressing my body into the wet ground, holding my breath. They passed very close. I could smell dirt and sweat. I heard them speaking softly, not shouting, not rushing, like they knew I wasn't going anywhere. I don't know how long I stayed there. They found me 2 days later. At least that's what the report said. I woke up with an emergency blanket stuck to my shoulders and the crackle of a radio nearby. My head was heavy, my throat dry. A ranger knelt beside me, asking my name and if I could stand. The place where I was found wasn't on any trail. One ranger said I was lucky to still be within the search area. No one explained how I got there. I didn't ask. The search for Eli lasted weeks. Helicopters, search dogs, volunteers, but not a single trace made sense. No clothing, no gear, no sign he had ever passed through the places we walked together. Eventually, the case was closed. Received a call from the ranger station. They had found something. On a metal table sat Eli's backpack. I recognized it instantly. It was intact, not rotted, not damaged. Almost everything inside was still there. Clothes, gear, the flashlight still worked. Only one thing was missing, the map. The Appalachian map he always kept in the front pocket. The backpack had been placed neatly near the old ranger station. I took it home. I never opened it again, because in the Appalachian Mountains, the most terrifying thing isn't what gets taken, but what gets left behind.